Was this the worst ending in Dragon Ball history? Mr. Scribbles is here to tell you if it was or not. Stay tuned. Dragon Ball DAIMA episode 20 ended in the most unique way I've ever seen any Dragon Ball series end before, and I'm here to cover all of it in this review. So, like the intro to Dragon Ball GT says, hold my hand and strap yourselves in because this is a big one. So first, I want to bring up the episode itself. I want to bring up some points in the episode. Like I mentioned last week with my predictions and all that stuff I was talking about, how it doesn't make any sense how you would only have a lot Piccolo to go and beat the back of Goma's head for the third eye. I pointed out last week how that made no sense because you have so many people standing on the sidelines doing jack all, and you're going to have Piccolo of all people be the only guy to hit Goma in the head. Yes, I know they're probably playing this off of the Raditz thing where it's like, okay, Piccolo, you strike him, and Goku, you fight him. But you didn't even see Piccolo getting ready to attack Goma until Goku had blasted a hole up inside of him, right? I thought it would have been better had they had Piccolo, show that he was ready to, get up in there and, cause havoc, but they didn't even do that. Another thing too was the action. So there's a weird thing with Dragon Ball and its action for the past few years where it's just this is what feels like the movie fights. And y'all know the difference too. The action needs to be slowed down for people to not comprehend, but well, that's part of it. But for people to digest what's going on. When it's just a stream, a barrage of hits and, just all that stuff, it blends in together. So while this animation does look beautiful, you tell me all the stuff that you remember from this fight versus a fight like Goku versus Vegeta. You can remember the Kamehameha. You can remember the Kaioken. You can remember Yajirobe chopping off his tail. Yajirobe, that is. You can remember stuff like that. Or Kuririn trying to freaking cut Vegeta's legs off and then Vegeta jumps. You can remember all that stuff because it slowed down at the right points. This episode felt rushed and janky in all the wrong ways. But there were some bright spots, and I'm going to mention them right now. Firstly, the good surprise, the one thing I was a bit, in just trying to see where they would go with this is how are they going to get the third eye out of Goma's head? I didn't think Piccolo would be the one to do it. I thought Arinsu would sacrifice herself, but it ended up being Majin Ku of all people. The MVP of this series was Majin Ku. He ends up taking the book, and by the way, that's a good thing. They use new characters they used them, that's a good thing. What was bad is that they didn't use all of them at once. They could have had the same thing happen with Piccolo, hitting Goma, but instead have everyone as a distraction, but that be, Goma wouldn't be able to, handle all the distractions, almost like Cell, right? When everyone was trying to blast Cell as he was fighting Gohan, and then have Majin Ku come in there with the book and just hit him with it. But they didn't have that. Regardless, it was still a pleasant surprise to have Majin Ku come in there with the book and hit him, which led to him becoming the new Supreme Demon King of the Demon Realm. So good on him. There was one thing I didn't notice either until this episode is that all the Supreme Demon Kings wore the exact same white cape. I was like, oh man, it's so obvious now because it was based off Dabur because he was obviously the first character created out of all these guys, but Abra had it and Goma and you just I realized I was like, oh wow, it makes so much sense. That displays who the Supreme King is. Okay. One thing that's gonna piss people off though is the fusion bugs not being used. Yeah, this is I can see how this would piss you off, and this is very annoying. Cause you set it up as a Chekhov's gun. It retroactively makes parts of episode 4 pointless now. Or just parts of this fight feel almost pointless. You have these bugs and you just kind of throw them off to the side like a used condom. It doesn't make sense. When the Chekhov's gun is like this. Let me explain this to y'all if y'all don't know. Back in the Namek arc, Vegeta was, hyping up the SS1 transformation, hyping it up, ever since Goku had arrived to planet Namek. And so for Goku to not transform into SS1 against Frieza, that would be a waste of time. Why even mention it? It's the exact same thing with these fusion bugs. Why mention it and tease this, right? You tease everybody. You cock tease the audience. You just cock tease the entire audience. And for it to not happen, And they didn't even it wasn't even mentioned in the ending sequence. They had the beauty bugs mentioned, the butte bugs, and the other the rest the senzu bugs or whatever they're called. They had those bugs mentioned, but they didn't even mention the fusion bugs. If this was done as a sort of joke, it's dumb, because why even have that? It's just, unless of course, like I mentioned in my prediction video, maybe this was used as a setup. I mentioned yesterday in my predictions video that Dragon Ball Daima might end on a cliffhanger. Well, it didn't really end on a cliffhanger, but there was a post-credit scene, which I pretty much just explained. So this could lead into new stories with the fusion bugs. Maybe that's how they're going to explain how Kaioshin and Kibito refused. There's a lot of stuff that it feels almost that they had like 3 episodes left, because, maybe they wanted to refuse Kaioshin and Kibito. Maybe they didn't care. Another thing that makes me think they didn't care is the whole SS4 thing. Goku straight up tells Vegeta the transformation he used was SS4, and he says it in a way like he already knew he could do it, even though you saw Neba inject the magic steroids in his body for him to do it. It was real jarring. But for those of you thinking that like Dragon Ball Super, this ties into Dragon Ball Super, now it's kind of becoming less coherent. And honestly, I don't even care. It's at this point, I think it should be obvious to everyone that they just do whatever they want with this series. Not in a bad way, but they do whatever they want. Like, they make these stories because people want them. SS4 was brought back because it's fan service. They brought Broly back as a woman and a new character because people wanted it. So these new series, Dragon Ball Minus, all this stuff, Super, GT, Daima, all this stuff, like, they can exist. They seem to exist in alternate timelines, like side stories, essentially like what Toriyama said for GT. Grand side stories is what they seem to be. And, that's pretty much what they seem to be. Okay, I'm beating that dead horse. But yeah, anyway, another thing that they didn't do was no Gohan. And I'm actually glad. I'm actually happy they didn't do this, because if he's not going to serve a purpose, you shouldn't even tease him, right? A lot of people were mad about that, but honestly, what would Gohan have done to change the situation? He would have gotten beat up like Vegeta. Nothing would have changed. Yeah, it would have been nice to see him in the show, but if he's not going to contribute anything to the series, I don't think it matters that he's in there. It's like Lunch being in Dragon Ball Z. Yeah, it'd be cool to see her beyond the Frieza arc, but what would she contribute to the series, She's just a cameo at that point. It's like the other characters. They appeared in episode 1 and I believe episode 2. And then after that, we saw clips of them in this episode. They didn't even get like speaking roles. You just saw clips of them at the end, So they were pretty much cameos too. And this episode it's low key all over the place in terms of they're doing so much at once, but they're not answering any questions at the same time, Like, there's so many questions about why. So one thing I like is that the eyeballs were still in the jar. That's pretty cool. But there's so many questions, and in a good way and in a bad way. I mentioned all the bad stuff, like the questions about the bad way stuff. But Pansy just hops in their ship, so I think she's gonna go to the mortal realm with them and just return back to the demon realm or whatever. It's just a whole bunch of weirdness. This is a weird ending. It's hard to explain how weird this ending is. You actually have to watch this ending. It feels more rushed than Dragon Ball Super's ending and more open-ended than GT's and Dragon Ball Z's ending. GT, yeah, it had a finality to it, but remember that ambiguity that GT had to its ending? And then Dragon Ball Z with the open-endedness. It's like it took every ending in Dragon Ball and mushed them into one. You got the rushed ending of Dragon Ball Super and the unanswered questions as well from Super. Also the unanswered questions and ambiguity from GT. The open-endedness of Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z. And then you also got finality in there with the Dragon Ball series, the anime ending, and even GT. So you got everything. It's like, yeah, have your cake and eat it too, except the cake just doesn't taste right, But this episode, man, it was strange. And I mean, there was stuff about this episode that had me thinking, like, if this was Dragon Ball back then, after Majin Buu had kicked Goma in the head, Goma probably would have just came back stronger like Cell, and they would have had to find a way to beat him like that, you know? But that was Dragon Ball Daima. I'm going to have to do videos where I rank every episode and review this series and all that stuff in the future and draw multiple things from this series. But what do y'all think of Dragon Ball Daima? What do you think of episode 20? Was this series good? How does it rank among the Dragon Ball series as a whole? Honestly, there was a bunch of episodes like 13, 14, and 9 that wasted so much time that you could have erased. And honestly, if you erase those episodes and actually, have Daima's story stay consistent, this episode 20, that is, might not have been as rushed. So let me know what you think in the comments of this episode and Dragon Ball Daima as a whole. Do you like Dragon Ball Daima? And do you want to know where any of this stuff is leading to? And what do you think will happen with Dragon Ball in the future? Let me know in the comments. Check out the Easter eggs video and more videos I got coming in the future. I'll see y'all in the next one.